Hey everybody, this is Dust for Dust on Gaming, continuing our standard Sendoff series. So, one of the other popular decks throughout the last 6 to 9, 10 months has been blue-black midrange. Some of this has evolved into Grixis midrange to include Nicol Bolas, but blue-black's probably been the more successful of the two overall. It had some success before Bolas was printed, had some success after Bolas was printed. So this is kind of the list that's been going on. There are some variations. Some run more cast downs and essence scatters, etc. There are variations, but this is kind of the list that's pretty stock from what's been going on. Got your Fatal Pushes, your cast downs, your Doomfalls, Vraska's Contempts, and Never to Return. Very powerful, but sorcery speed, so doesn't see as much play as Vraska's Contempt. Plus the double black. Really flexible card. This deck's about grinding 1-for-1 and then using its 2-for-1 advantages in things like Argyl's Bloodfast, Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk, and Liliana Death's Majesty. Deck suffers from a couple problems. First, you have the 50-50 gem problem of drawing the wrong portion of your deck at the wrong time. You also have the problem with a lot of decks can get under you, decks like red-black and especially the mono-red aggro decks. So, this deck has a lot of power to it, but relies on 1-for-1s and surviving long enough to be able to turn things around with Argyl's Bloodfast and your 5 and 6 drops. Beyond that, you got a Glimmer of Genius, some Champion of Wits to give you some card selection, some Glint-Sleeve Siphoners to draw you cards a la Dark Confidant, and then Doomfall does, split card of Edict effect and exiling a card from your opponent's hand. So, very powerful deck, but deck has a lot of issues and requires very technical type play to leverage the most. Like, are you supposed to hold up Essence Scatter? Are you supposed to play Glint-Sleeve Siphoner? Etc., etc. Sideboard has a lot of powerful options, as you may imagine. You have Walking Ballista for creature matchups, can also come in against control. Sorcerer's Spyglass is an answer to things like Planeswalkers. Henny's Expertise when you need a sweeper. Essence Extraction for aggro matchups. Infernal Reckoning pretty much in here for the red-black matchup. 3 Duresses comes in against control and mid-range. 2 Jace's Defeats, pretty good against control decks. Comes in against any blue decks, obviously. A Negate for control decks and the decks with a lot of Planeswalkers. Spell Pierce, this one's a little more kind of niche, but can come in when you need some efficiency in the early turns against something like Burn. Also come in against control when you can force situations to counter stuff. Vizier, pretty good against the green decks with things like Vine Mare giving you problems, and then Search for Azcanta when you need some additional card selection / card advantage in certain matchups. So, straight up, this is not my best style of deck. It's definitely a deck style that I need to work on, but I did play 4 matches, 2 in some practice leagues, 2 in some 2-man queues. They're not the greatest examples of what the deck's capable of. Well, actually, they're pretty good examples of what the deck's capable of, but they're not the greatest in terms of like the technical play of the decks. So please keep that in mind as I review the matches. Game history. So it's these 4 matches right here. Yeah, I believe it's I guess these 4. Alright, so yeah. First one was a little bit weird. We played against a variant of Blue-Red Wizards, so it's a pretty good test to a certain degree, but there were definitely some errors made on my part. First thing first, opening hand. This hand's pretty solid in terms of, like, you have a Fatal Push, you have a Doomfall, you have an Argyl's Bloodfast. You're a little bit short on lands, which can be a problem with a deck that's this mana hungry. But I think overall between the Bloodfast and if you draw a blue source for the Champion of Wits, this hand's pretty reasonable. So, lead on Swamp, go. Opponent plays Highland Lake, so could be a deck like Grixis at this point. We're not quite sure. Play the Bloodfast out because it's the most mana efficient play. Opponent plays an Omen Speaker. We go ahead and Doomfall them. Saw a hand of Wizard's Retort, Shock, Spell Pierce, and Gutter Snipe. I end up taking Retort here. What I should have done was taken Gutter Snipe, because Gutter Snipe is actually kind of difficult for our current hand to deal with. We have to sack Field of Ruin and Fatal Push it. That actually causes some problems for us down the line, as you'll see. Opponent just plays attacks with their thing, that's fine. We hold up Essence, can't really hold up Essence Scatter here, and that kind of punishes us here. As they get in with Omen Speaker, and then they cast their Gutter Snipe. And then I go for Scarab God here. The correct play here might have been to Field of Ruin plus Fatal Push, but it's a play we end up running next turn. We really don't have any creatures in the graveyard. No attacks. Do the Field of Ruin trick. Get a land, and they end up punishing us here by having double Spell Pierce. So Spell Pierce does that. And then they get us... Opponent did make a mistake of double Spell Piercing before we paid for the first one. So I was able to cast a copy of Champion of Wits here. I ended up pitching both lands. It's possible I should have gotten in with Scarab God here, but then we get double shocked and then Wizard's Lightning, and that was pretty much the game. So our Gutter Snipe ended up turning our opponent's shocks into 4-point spells and Wizard's Lightning into 7 or 5 damage, so kind of got burned out of nowhere. So a lot of mistakes in that game. Should have just taken the Gutter Snipe, would have solved most of them, and then the possibly could have drawn out the Wizard's Rebuke with the Champion. This hand's a little slow. There's a good chance with as much burn as in our opponent's deck, the Siphoner will just die. That is one burn spell not being pointed at our face, so hand's pretty reasonable. I was gonna say, I end up running out the Bloodfast here because I don't want to run directly into our opponent having a shock effect here. They play an Omen Speaker. I play Glint Sleeve to play a tap land. As expected, our opponent had a shock there. It's possible I should have Contempt there before they untapped, but they could have something like Spell Pierce. Let's go ahead and take the damage here. Fire off the Contempt. They end up just letting it go. I play the Champion of Wits, not wanting to run Liliana into something. They have a shock. We still get to loot here. I think I end up pitching Never to Return and Gearhulk? No, Never to Return and Siphoner. Might have been correct to just pitch Gearhulk there, but there's no guarantee our Liliana resolves, so opponent taps out for Gutter Snipe here. We try to draw a land. We hit cast down. So we cast that down. Draw a card, hoping to hit a land. We hit a Champion of Wits. Opponent uses Omen Speaker. We just go ahead and run out Gearhulk here. Try to flash back the Vraska's Contempt. Trying to keep our opponent's creatures under control. They don't end up having anything. They opt into some lands. We start getting aggressive. Play out our Champion of Wits, because once again, playing around counter spells. Opponent Lightning Strikes, and then Lightning Strikes. So they're bringing a lot of resources to kill our creatures. They're not aiming it at us, which is a positive. Draw a bunch of cards. I think at this point I can safely run out Liliana around Spell Pierce. Go ahead and plus it, get the thing, and then they get the zombie, attack with the champion, and then next turn we have access to both Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk. And our opponent's kind of low on resources here, so once this Liliana resolves. And finally, Game 3. It's one of the more interesting matchups. I think it showed the flexibility of the deck in some of the post-board configurations. Let's try this again. Having issues keeping thing small enough here. When I do the max screen, it some reason goes over the border. Alright. The sand, no blue mana. In a matchup this fast, we can't afford that, so I mulligan. The sand's a little risky. We have Fatal Push, we have Cast Down. We need to try to hit our land drops. Bottom the Siphoner. We lead on off on Opt, which is fine. We don't hit our land drop. Don't hit our land drop again. They run out the Pyromancer, which is the first time we see that. Go ahead and try to Fatal Push this here. They Spell Pierce. Go ahead and Fatal Push again. Here, just pretty much holding up Cast Down. I don't really want to cast Siphoner and all this open mana. Run out the Blood fast. They Spell Pierce it. Now I start deploying my guys because they've got nothing else going on. They go ahead and burn it. Once again, if our opponent's putting burn spells at our thing, that's good for us. We have to hold up Negate and Cast Down here. Go ahead and fight over this. It's maybe not worth it. They burn a Wizard's Retort here. So they get our guy, we get some energy, but they're down to one card in hand. They resolve a Lava Runner. We go ahead and pass, intending to Glimmer of Genius this turn. Once again, hit the Cast Down here. They have a Wizard's Retort, which is fine. Their last card ends up being a creature. We go ahead and Essence Scatter. They're flooding pretty hard. Do this. Play out Scarab God while they can't do anything. Not sure what that attack was trying to prove, and then they just concede. So, that was pretty much match number 1. Obviously not the fully powered, even Blue-Red Wizards deck, but did kind of show the deck can beat a blue-red burn deck, so it's pretty nice to see. We got to see kind of a couple different ends of the spectrum with this deck. Game number 2, I'm trying to remember what this matchup was. I think it was, guess we'll find out. Big hand, we're on the play. This hand's pretty reasonable. Got a push, got an Essence Scatter. Among the more important cards in most matchups. Let's run the Swamp out here. Opponent leads on If Near Deadlands. Hold up Essence Scatter here, let Dread Wanderer resolve. Go ahead and push it. We miss land drops, our opponent resolves a Scrounger, which I could have countered, but they would have gotten back immediately, so it wasn't really worth it. They go for Death Baron here. We go ahead and scatter that. Need to draw a land here. Play out Champion, trying to find a land. We do. Pitch a Scarab God, and never to return. Keeping the land. Figure we can get Scarab God back with a Liliana. And their opponent runs out Liliana's Mastery, which is definitely a problem for our deck. Just go ahead and take the damage here. Play the Contempt to get rid of that. Then they have a play a Lord of the Accursed, get to swing in for a bunch here. Like, we have Liliana here, and we can bring back Scarab God, but we're behind on board. And our opponent plays really go wide on the board. This isn't the first time our opponent did some really weird stuff. Kill the Lord here, but we're still kind of behind on board. Get a Cast Down here, get a zombie from Liliana. You get a zombie. We kill Graveyard Marshal, but we're just dead on board. Especially as soon as our opponent adds another Liliana's Mastery. So they could have done Mastery, they could have just been If Near Deadlands on one of these two, and it would have been lethal. So that was pretty much game 1. Swing with everything, we concede. Game 2. We ended up winning this match, which was really weird, but our opponent did some bizarre stuff, so. Sounds a little, like, awkward in terms of, like, we have nothing but 1-for-1 removal, which is fine in the matchup, but not great. Lead on the top land here. Opponent had no turn 1 play. Turn 2 play is Scrappy. Go ahead and Doomfall. Their hand is kind of garbage here. Their hand is Graveyard Marshal and Lord of the Accursed. I think we end up taking Lord of the Accursed. Yeah. This Graveyard Marshal is kind of useless in the face of Scrapheap Scrounger here. Comes Graveyard Marshal again for 3. Just go ahead and never to return that zombie. They have a Death Baron. We go ahead and push that, intending to return the Scrounger on our turn. Death Baron really doesn't matter for a turn. Go ahead and flash back this return, get rid of Scrounger. Opponent weirdly attacks in here, taps some mana, does nothing with it. We go ahead and pass her with 6 mana up. We have Lord of the Accursed, get in for 3 here. Which that's fine. Cast Glimmer here. See Scarab God. Get Scarab God in the swamp. See Yahenni's Expertise. End up just casting the Expertise to clear their board out. When it has 3 cards in hand, we have a Scarab God and a... I think we just cast Scarab God at this point, or do I cast Gearhulk? Nope. Turn last Champion of Wits, get a bunch more cards. This is where this deck just kind of takes over. Get rid of the Siphoners, because they're not really relevant at this point in the game. And just start taking over with just... Our opponent here attacks for like no real relevant reason at all. Play out Scarab God, and the game's pretty much over from here. Opponent once again taps a bunch of mana for no reason. We block with Scarab God. Go ahead and start bringing back these Siphoners. Start draining our opponent out. Brought back both Siphoners, drain them, and then that's pretty much game. Tap a bunch of mana for no reason. And then opponent dies to the trigger. In game 3, much the same thing. As long as you can survive the early onslaught and they don't have a Liliana or a Liliana's Mastery, not really a whole lot the zombies deck can do. Sand's pretty reasonable. We've got Fatal Push on 2, and then plays on 3 and 4. So, overall, pretty reasonable hand. Like to be interacting early with your aggressive opponents. Opponent with no 1-drop kind of bails us out a little bit. Graveyard Marshal. Go ahead and pass here. Let them get in with the Marshal. We push, even though we really didn't have to. So I end up just being mana efficient, run out the champion here. Get rid of 2 lands, I believe. No, land and Siphoner. Opponent murders our guy. They play Death Baron. Run out Doomfall, see what's in their hand. Because at this point we're getting afraid of 5-mana Liliana Death. Liliana's Mastery, we see Liliana touched by Death and Death Baron. We obviously take Liliana here. This puts us behind on the board. We're going to start taking some hits from the Lords. Take a hit for 3 here. Just pass. They play again another Lord. Start swinging in. We start Lilianaing them down. Or sorry, Vraska's Contempting them down. Play another land and pass. Opponent's got quite a bit of pressure on the board. They kill their own dude for no reason whatsoever. Wasn't sure if they were planning on returning this Champion of Wits or what the game plan was. Plus no attack. I guess they're trying to respect Gearhulk here, is my only consideration. So we take the opportunity to Glimmer. Draw some lands. Decide to play out of land. Bring back that Champion, because that was the only thing that made sense that they would kill their own guy to do. Draw a bunch of cards. Pitch a Swamp and a Never to Return. Let our opponent do their thing. They could have If Near Deadlands us down to a 2-2, so I don't get to trade with anything. So I just block and trade. Never thing. Use Return to get rid of Dread Wanderer, so they can't bring that back. Play as Diregraph Ghoul. We push it at the end of turn. Play Champion of Wits. Get more card selection. Discard Champion of Wits. And Fatal Push. Because we have the Essence Scatter to pretty much cover their next play. As you can see, they're burning a lot of time. Especially when you consider how much time this deck actually burns. You just tap all their mana for no reason whatsoever. We flash in Gearhulk, go ahead and Glimmer of Genius. Doomfall, see they have nothing in hand. Get them down to 3, and then we get rid of our graveyard for no apparent reason, and then we just kill them. So, match number 2 is kind of what it was. Match number 3 and 4 were a little more interesting, but they weren't exactly tier decks either. Match 1, we were up against a kind of a more tap-out control deck. Actually, they were both kind of tap-out control decks. This was an interesting dichotomy of matches. Fatal Push, Doomfall, Supreme Will, Liliana. Pretty decent hand other than lack of blue mana. Opponent leads on that, so we kind of know we're up against a control deck most likely. We have Authority of the Council's main, which I found interesting. Must really hate losing to red. So, trying to find land drops. Opponent Ixalan's Binding, our Bloodfast. So we actually outdraw our opponent badly in this matchup, but game 1, we just don't have the tools to deal with what they're doing. Try to play a Doomfall, they negate it. Can't play the Bloodfast, so we have a bunch of cards in our hand that don't do anything. The only card we really have is this Liliana here, and we don't have enough mana to back it up with Supreme Will, so running it out is kind of crazy in the face of potential counter magic. You just continue to draw more mana. We run Liliana out, it resolves. Turns out our opponent really doesn't care. Just play another Ixalan's Binding here. Get rid of our Liliana. We try to tap them out, they just pay for it. Lose our Liliana, so two of our more difficult to deal with threats are already dealt with by Ixalan's Binding, and we don't have any way to get it back. They play Precognition Field. Basically, they're a pseudo... So we take the Gearhulk here, obviously. I guess I'll farm to market. We play a Champion of Wits, they counter it. We play Gearhulk. We counter it. We bring back Champion of Wits, draw a bunch of cards. Pitch the Bloodfast and the Never to Return, because it doesn't even appear they have that many Planeswalkers. We play out the Siphoner. We just play Approach of the Second Sun. We we see a hand that's absolutely stacked. A Fumigate, Ixalan's Binding, that, and the Angel of Sanctions we got rid of. So there's pretty much no way we're going to be able to kill them before... pretty much know we're going to be able to kill them before that approach comes back around. They Fumigate us. Play a Dovin Bond, draw a card. Play Champion of Wits here. Made one mistake by playing my land already this turn. So, wasn't able to Field of Ruin their thing here. Go ahead and flash back on their farm to market, and then they get an Anticipate and just kind of jam here. And we didn't have any kind of counter magic. Not really a whole lot of counter magic that mattered in game one. And in the sideboard, there's a lot of like Jace's defeats and stuff, which is better against like traditional blue-white or Esper instead of this kind of tap-outy control deck our opponent brought in. We have a lot of sideboard cards from the matchup. I mean, let's go back to taking a look at like all the different cards. You have like the Duresses, the Search for Azcanta, the Spell Pierce, the Negates. Still brought in the Jace's defeats, brought in the Spyglass, and the Walking Ballista as an additional threat. So, we had a lot to bring in, but the nature of how their particular deck was constructed actually made the matchup kind of difficult, because they had a lot of, like, Ixalan's Binding, especially when you don't have any ways of bouncing it or getting rid of it. Extremely annoying. Our opener, you know, pretty solid. We have 3 lands, a Siphoner, a Search for Azcanta. Play that out. We end up drawing Bloodfast. I end up playing the Siphoner because it's the least mana investment. We actually do get to draw a card or two off of it. We're now to the Azcanta here, and it resolves. Keep a Gearhulk. Go ahead and seal away our guy here. Or sorry, farm our guy here, so we run out the Bloodfast. No Ixalan's Binding, which was nice. To draw some cards. Put that into the graveyard. Champion of Wits actually resolves. Go ahead and pitch some lands here. Go ahead and Supreme Will. Patient Rebuilding. This was the card that eventually puts us away this game. Milled a bunch of cards, drew them a bunch of cards. Actually far outstripped anything we did, and blue-black has no way to remove it, so interesting card from M19. It's kind of a Teferi Light-ish kind of thing, plus a win con. Kind of difficult to interact with. It's not really an activated ability, it's just a trigger. So, it ends up being the card that does this in this game. I mean, we have 45 to 47 cards. We're already seeing a lot more cards than our opponent. But notably, we haven't seen any discard or any counter spells, so we've just been kind of running our card advantage engine out there. Draw another land. Put a Supreme Will in the graveyard, which may not have been correct here. But then they start milling us. See a Siphoner. Cast a Duress. This hand's just absolutely loaded. Supreme Will, Pull from Tomorrow, Negate, Fumigate, Far into Market, Anticipate, and a land. That's pretty difficult to fight through. I believe I end up taking Supreme Will here and resolving Scarab God, I think was the play. Yeah, I end up taking Supreme Will, resolving Scarab God, or sorry, Siphoner. Maybe it should have been Scarab God there. Or sorry, they had Fumigate in hand, so it really made no sense to run that one out there. So again, this Patient Rebuilding, they Fumigate us. Cast that, get a Liliana here. We know they have the Jace's defeat in hand, so I think I run out the Liliana. Yeah, I run out the Liliana here. Nope, Scarab God. They have negate now, Jace's defeat in this hand. Anticipate again. Patient rebuilding continues to go to work. We have Nixilon's binding. Once again, kind of hard for our deck to deal with. Draw a card. Back champion. Go ahead and run out Duress here, which was a mistake. I should have done this the following turn with a Liliana. Run Recognition Field. We see their hand here, which is still very stacked. That's when we saw the Jace's defeat they had. So, their hand's just loaded. Attack. Go ahead and farm that. We run out our Liliana. Or sorry, we run out the Gear Hulk while the Jace's defeat is down. Go ahead and try to Glimmer here. I choose not to cast it because we're already down to 16 cards in the deck. I'll just fumigates it away. Run out champion. We contribute to our own demise here, but we gotta try to get our opponent dead. Opponent has the third fumigate of the game. Bring back Scarab God. Go ahead and run out Gear Hulk to negate this with Supreme Will. Allows us to keep our board intact here. Patient rebuilding continues to kind of do its thing. We let this happen. Go ahead and attempt this. They have a counter to fight over this, which is fine. We just untap. Do it again. Probably should have done during upkeep, but in the end, we're down to 3 cards in library. Patient rebuilding will kill us over the next turn cycle, and there's no way we can kill them before it's too late. And then bring the Champion of Wits back, decline to attack. Opponent puts us into no graveyard. We try to bring as many things back as possible. Because theoretically it's possible for this deck to win with no cards in library, if you can get enough zombies in play and drain with the Scarab God trigger. But our opponent ran us out of resources, so that was that. It was a very interesting take on blue-white with Patient Rebuilding as a sideboard card. Recognition Field. It just looks like a poor man's blue-white control, but it was more tap out, dealt with a lot of things, so anyone had an Approach of the Second Sun as a win con. So this deck was probably pretty close to what Approach of the Second Sun would have been, like out of the starter pack pretty much earlier in the season. And kind of the crazy thing is outside of the Angel of Sanctions, and obviously the Dovin Bond, a lot of what was going on in this deck survives. So it was kind of interesting to see this deck. Nixilon's Binding is a beating if you can't answer it. So, keep this card in mind going forward into Standard of the next year. It's not an instant speed, but that card resolves. It takes out, game 1 it took out 2 of our best anti-control threats, 2 of our resilient threats, and then just kind of annihilated us here with Scarab God this game. We were able to bring Scarab God back with Liliana, but sometimes you don't have the back door to do it. And then, finally, this was another weird matchup. We were up against red-white board control. It's basically like the old red-white approach decks without the approach and Sunbird's Invocation, at least that we saw. That seems pretty reasonable in most matchups. We have a Siphoner, a Never to Return, and a Glimmer, so plays on 2, 3, and 4. Go ahead and run that out, planning on casting the Siphoner with the Ether Hub to get us the extra energy. Excuse me. Main reason I went in the awkward sequencing I went, especially when our opponent shows us this, I'm figuring the Siphoner's not going to live long. Dies to a Magma Spray. Opponent plays Gideon here. So here I decided to cast Doomfall, see what the heck's going on over here. Our opponent shows us a hand of Chandra, Karn, Abrade, Settle the Wreckage, and Scavenger Grounds. That's a lot of hits. I ended up taking Karn because Chandra's just kind of whatever. Karn could have potentially left behind a construct which could have been relevant on this board, so I ended up taking Karn, leaving them with a hand of a land, Chandra, and then a Braid and Settle the Wreckage. So this deck has a hard time attacking Planeswalkers, but it does have 6 ways to kill them. So I figured we were going to draw answers eventually. Go ahead and do this Never to kill Chandra. Continue taking the beat down from Gideon over the next couple turns. I cycle a land. We start digging here. Plan on casting Glimmer. So I cast Glimmer. See Fatal Push and Doomfall. Obviously bottom the push. I keep the Doomfall and got lucky to draw Contempt. The reason I kept Doomfall was to try to snipe another Planeswalker from their hand if they had one this coming turn. See, Fight with Fire, Fumigate, Settle the Wreckage, and Abrade. Fight with Fire is a scary card in a control deck. So I actually kind of like the inclusion in this red-white control list. I ended up taking Fight with Fire because the other cards I basically don't care about. This is their hand at this point in time. Just plan on contempting their Gideon. Gideon comes in, we just go ahead and contempt it. Then drawing a Halati, Warrior Poets. Play Gearhulk, instantly kill it, even though we know we're going to die to a Braid there. I'm playing Liliana, bring back Gearhulk. And I completely missed my opponent at Scavenger Grounds, so I should have just plus Liliana here. It's one of the mistakes I made, so it's kind of opened things back up for opponent to get back into the game. Do that. I'm going to try to exhaust some of my opponent's removal here. They have Magma Spray on top of the cards we already knew about. We push their Dinosaur. Get my Scarab God into play. Play the Blood Fat. Nope. I guess we're just bringing back Champion of Wits here. This is where we start kind of out-grinding what the opponent's doing a little bit. Don't attack and they're Settle the Wreckage. I attack with a guy I don't care about. They end up having a Seal Away here. Plays Thematic Compass, which turns into basically Maze of Ith. Run out this. Nothing to bring back in the graveyards because they have been exiling everything. We only have 3 life from the damage they've done to us. Do this because I intend on sacrificing if they go for it. They end up just playing on Maze of Ithing here, so they took the 5. They play another Halati. I just kill their Planeswalker because we know we're not necessarily getting through combat-wise. Use the Never to exile one of their guys. They Maze of Ith our guy. This dies pretty much for no value. Other than the fact we get to bring it back, gain a little bit of life here. They end up punishing us here with Magma Spray plus a Braid to kill our Scarab God, but fortunately we had another one lined up. They don't attack here, which I don't know if I agree with. Continuing to grind here for a while. We'll back our zombie. Chandra continues to plunk away at us. We need to find an answer to her. Go and activate this. Bring back Champion of Wits, draw some cards. Don't see an answer right away, so scry 2, scry both those to the bottom, see a Field of Ruin. Gonna attack Chandra to draw out their Settle the Wreckage. We sacrifice Scarab God here, gain some life, plus get that Settle the Wreckage out of their hand. Get some lands out of our deck. Got Champion of Wits continuing to dig. Still don't find an answer to Chandra yet. Fatal Push their guy. Scarab God comes back. They plus. And they still have their last card in their hands, a Fumigate. We Field of Ruin their Amazivith effect. Knock their Chandra off of ultimate. Play out our Scarab God. Play out the other Arguel's Bloodfast. Opponent plays Arcane Encyclopedia and Arch of Orzaka. They fumigate us. Sacrifice the Scarab God, gain some more life. Once again, their Chandra is in danger of ultimating. Scarab God comes back. We draw Contempt. Go ahead and contempt their Chandra off the board. Play out Scarab God again. Play out Siphoner. Draws card. Angel of Sanctions, we go ahead and counter. I figured they were just going to run it back. They play Gideon, plus on our guy. Bring back their Angel of Sanctions to kill their Gideon. Bring back Champion, draw some more cards. See a Liliana. I think we end up keeping the Liliana. No, we end up downing the Liliana here. Oh, because we're getting low on cards. It's one thing about this deck, is it churns through cards. Plays a Gideon, we don't care. Place the Mana Compass. Scavenger Grounds is a little annoying. Hoping to flashback this Vraska's in Contempt here. We obviously use Scavenger Grounds. So the only card we basically have to dodge is yet another sweeper out of their deck. Because we're putting them in a really low life total here. Draw a card. Send these two at Gideon, that one and that one at them. So they have to use their Mazavith to not die here. Put them to 1, and then they draw a bunch of cards, and then we drain them and kill them. So, pretty much had to use all parts of the Buffalo there. Game 2, a little bit more difficult against than your normal control decks because our Jace's defeats don't do anything. So brought in a lot of the same cards we brought in against the blue-white control deck. This game ends up being really weird because they had some interesting inclusions. I kept a couple Essence Scatters in because we saw those Angel of Sanctions. And a lot of control decks obviously have a semi-transformational plan, and I didn't want to get hit by something like Glorybringer or something on the sideboard. Beat on Inspiring Vantage. We play nothing. I didn't run this Walking Ballista out because I didn't want it to die to a Didn't want it to die to something like Magma Spray or something that they showed us in Game 1. And sure enough, this champion gets hit with a Magma Spray. Pitch the Essence Scatter, because I don't feel like they're going to have much in the way of that. And they don't have a ton of early interaction. We end up negating this Gideon here. So we end up taking Karn. They have a hand to Sell the Wreckage, Banefire, Gideon, and Seal Away. Karn was the most powerful card, but it ends up coming back to bite us a little bit because they end up playing Gideon plus Banefire this next turn cycle, though they could have gone Gideon plus Seal Away. Gideon, Banefire our guy, make the emblem, kill their Gideon. So we start to pull away with card advantage a little bit here. Opponent tries to Magma Spray the champion. We end up killing it with Walking Ballista here. Play this Spyglass out. No, I guess we just keep pumping our... Bring back the Champion of Wits. Discard some lands. Not attacking because the Seal the Way and the Settle the Wreckage. So Arcane Encyclopedia comes down. Attack with that, see if they try to Seal the Way or anything. Go ahead and play this. They activate their Encyclopedia. Their hand at that point is like a Seal Away, a Settle the Wreckage, and Inspiring Vantage. So, not a whole lot going on. I just named Encyclopedia here. So it's like our one way to... And then they play Chaos Wand, which, given the fact that our deck is a bunch of kill spells and a couple of counter spells and some discard spells, this ended up making the game very tricky. Because at this point our primary way of winning the game is Walking Ballista, because that's all we've got going on at the moment. Let's go ahead and pump it up, not even trying to bluff here. They play Gideon. Try to never their guy. Activate Chaos Wand. They get a Doomfall. Force us to... I just do this so I can potentially get it back, but then the Ixalan's binding our things, so they can start drawing more cards. Again, our goal is Bloodfast. They play Halati. We go ahead and kill Halati. Start drawing some cards, because we're still at a fairly decently high life total. Out the Scarab God here. I'll draw some cards. Runs another Halati out there. Bring back the Siphoner. This next attack goes incredibly poorly. Cast Duress, take their Settle the Wreckage. Trying to kill the Halati. They activate Chaos Wand. They find a Vraska's Contempt. Kill our thing here. We bring back Walking Ballista. They get to double block our thing. Keep their Warrior Poet alive. They start attacking. We block. They have Lightning Strike here to punish us. Make another guy. Draw a card. Draw another card. See another Scarab God. We're out the Scarab God. At this point, we're both getting very low on time. They activate Chaos Wand, hit an Essence Scatter, so it's kind of a miss. They kind of got us with the last one, and the Ixalan's binding us here anyway. Take away our Scarab God. I cast there. Cast Glimmer. Get the Spell Pierce and this Vraska's Contempt. Use the Contempt to kill. They hit a Duress. We Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce actually ended up being kind of... Actually, there was nothing even in our hand they could even really take, which was kind of entertaining. I ended up getting rid of Gear Hulk and Search for Azcanta. Figuring I can get the other Gearhulk back with a Liliana here. Opponent knocks us down to 6. Use Liliana to get back Gearhulk. Gearhulk uses Vraska's Contempt on one of these. Once again, try to activate. They get a Duress, which at this point is kind of whatever. Play out the Siphoner. Opponent with Scavenger Grounds makes our cast Never on Liliana, which is interesting. Just let that go because it's not worth fighting over. And they cast Settle the Wreckage that we use Supreme Will to counter the Spell Pierce since they... At this point we drop them to 8. They play a Fumigate to clear our board. Now it's just pretty much a time race. We play out the 2 Siphoners. Use Chaos 1. We're running really low on cards. There's a Thematic Compass. At this point we're ahead on time. Try to stay ahead on time. Still trying to somewhat legitly win the game. Obviously they're kind of limited to what they can do. Go ahead and attack Karn here. They're obviously not playing optimally, and then they just die due to timeout. But to be fair, we were up a game, and they did have to win 2 games, so maybe I didn't have to be quite as aggressive in winning the game, and just made sure I was up on time. But their deck was pretty sweet. Obviously, once again, Ixalan's Binding, extremely annoying for these blue-black non-white decks to contend with. So, going into the next format, you might want to make sure you have Divine Offering somewhere in your 75 or wherever, just to make sure you have answers to these Ixalan's Bindings, because they're a real devil of a card to answer. So, but back to blue-black. Ended up going 3-1 in the deck, or 3-1 with the deck. A lot of it is the sequencing with the cards. We didn't play against any real tier-ish things except for the pseudo blue-white approach deck and the zombies deck. And let's be honest, our zombies deck opponent wasn't exactly playing as tight as possible. But obviously you got to see the power of the deck, how it churns through cards once it gets rolling. It's a very powerful deck. Obviously it has some synergy issues with Siphoner and Champion being vulnerable to Chain Whirler in this format, but this is one of the more powerful decks in the format, and I honestly think if Chain Whirler weren't such a thing, this might have ended up being the best deck in the format. This or the Grixis version that we'll probably try to get to later. But yeah, very powerful deck, very powerful strategy overall. A lot of card draw, a lot of one-for-one answers, but sometimes when your opponent has things like Ixalan's Binding and you're not packing enough negates, run into some problems. So, got punished for, at least in the matchups we played, for our selection of Jace's defeats over actual negate. Obviously it's relevant against things like Esper and the mirror match, so, take that with a grain of salt. But this has been Dust for Dust on Gaming with a wrap-up with Dimir Midrange. So, going into Guilds of Ravnica standard here, but this is the tail end of M19 standard, so this deck will be rotating out. Most of the payoffs in this deck will be rotating, so unfortunately this is probably this deck's last hurrah. So, this has been Dusk for Dust on Gaming.